Hello and welcome to Canvas, the Niger-Delta Roundtable, where I discuss the future of the Niger-Delta region, humongously blessed with hydrocarbon resources. Now, every week, I give time to reflecting on topics relevant to the development of the Niger-Delta and the people. This episode is no different, as I'm here once again to focus on how to take the region to a more promising future. This podcast is sponsored by the operator of the NNPC SPDC Total Energies Archive Joint Venture, Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria Limited, headquartered in Port Harcourt. Thank you for joining. I'm Adedayo Elushakin. And on this episode of Canvas, we're discussing the topic: Is poetry worth the words? In this episode, we explore the beauty and depth of the written word. And today we have a special episode in honor of World Poetry Day. Poetry has been a cherished form of expression for centuries, capturing the essence of human emotions, experiences, and thoughts in a way that prose often cannot. From the ancient epics of Homer to the modern verses of contemporary poets, poetry has always held a unique place in our hearts and minds. But is poetry truly worth the words? What is it about the art form that continues to captivate and inspire us? On this World Poetry Day, we celebrate the power of poetry to transcend time and culture, to speak to the universal human experience, and to evoke emotions that resonate deeply within us. Poetry is more than just a collection of words. It's a way of seeing the world, of understanding ourselves and others, and of expressing the inexpressible. Again, on this episode, the topic is poetry worth the words? My guest is Tonye Franklin. Tonye Franklin, who goes by the pseudonym Big Mama, is a creative, a spoken word poet known for her audacious delivery, insightful messages, and regal stage appearances. She spreads her creative bent via broadcast and social media, as well as fashion. She is the brain behind Press Play with Big Mama, an online game show where people find happy in the little things. And if dance was an ocean, she'd be a sea creature. Tonye, hi, welcome to Canvas and Niger-Delta Roundtable.
Thank you so much, Dio. It's so nice to be here.
Or do I call you Big Mama?
I mean, you could.
Which do you prefer?
Okay, since we're talking poetry, and that is a pen name and a brand for poetry, so we could go with Big Mama.
I'm a curious person, naturally. How did you come about that?
Okay, I saw that coming. So, first of all, Mama is already like my nickname at home, what we call pet name. And the name itself, the Big Mama, it's an acronym that was birthed off one of my ideologies like in life. And it is believe in growth because many abilities are made available. So it was a constant observation of myself, how I, moved from one thing, one skill to the next and kept, growing in skill. I mean, dancing was what I knew myself for.
Oh.
And then poetry came. And then, of course, I've always loved photography. So photography, content creation, and all of those things, it's just like we all keep growing. So we believe in growth and many abilities are made available.
All right, great. Maybe someday when we're discussing dancing or photography or some other art form, would have
I'll be there.
But the focus for this episode is poetry.
Of course.
What is poetry, really?
If I want to go by, our normal definition of poetry, how it uses, style and pattern to express different things, maybe stories and the rest, I could say that. But if I go by my own definition, I'll just say poetry is it's how color marries truth. Like it's a thin line that joins the truth or maybe fiction and color. basically poetry colors everything that you are trying to talk about using poetry, using the art form. So yes, poetry is, I call it a vehicle that you could use to transport different messages to different people in different ways. It is still poetry, but then there are different styles to it.
Would I be right to say that the tool used or employed in poetry, irrespective of style, is words?
Of course. Of course. I mean, poetry is expressed through words. And yeah, poetry is expressed through words, although we somehow have been able to infuse different things. It's large. It's large. There are different ways you could express poetry using words, but then you can embellish it with every other thing.
Okay. So, is poetry any combination of words? For example, I'm going to use the things that you can see that are very obvious on this set right
Okay.
now. So, if we were to say microphone, table, mug, bright smile, hair, clothes,
Okay.
is that poetry?
Not exactly. You were just mentioning things. But then,
Okay, let me try.
putting
Let me give a different shot.
okay.
Cup on the table, microphone in front of me.
Okay,
Tonye
those are
Bigama
just
smiling. Is that poetry?
that's prose. You're just saying things.
Okay.
So when I say color, this is what I mean. Dio smiles as brightly as the lights above me. Okay. Did I get you? Do I need to smile like that? So that is an embellishment. Okay. That is me making, instead of just saying,
Wait,
oh, you smile.
is that true or did you just make that up?
You do with that information what you want. What you want with it. But yes, of course, you smile brightly. Don't you think so?
No, sir.
Because you just, the way you smirk.
Yeah, you made me smile.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what poetry does too. I could put a smile on your face without doing so much. Yeah. So, of course, poetry is the embellishment. I could be talking about this cup of water, but not just saying, oh, there's a cup of water here. I could make it look a lot, or make it sound a lot more beautiful and a lot more colorful. That's what poetry does.
I've heard it said while I was researching this, conversation and preparing for it. I came upon several texts and literature, and many describe poetry as a powerful form of expression, a powerful art form. Can you share your thoughts on that, on this tag of powerful form of expression?
Okay, so I'm going to use we all know I have a dream. You know that, right? I don't want to mention, but that in itself is poetry. And now that was used to pass a very
Pardon me, for the person who may not know, that's the speech delivered by Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah, exactly. So that in itself was used to pass a very powerful message across, and it was what? Poetry. So poetry, in fact, if everybody knows that they somehow have expressed themselves through poetry, even in their day-to-day lifestyle, I think we would understand it more and we would embrace it more. But then, yes, poetry is very powerful, and it is because when it comes to things like activism, maybe channeling your voice towards a particular movement, a particular issue, poets have been included, and poets have somehow lent their voices to these kinds of movements. So of course, if poetry is used to throw light on a particular thing, or is made to get people to see or understand a particular issue, or turn their eyes to a particular thing, then of course it is powerful, because it's a channel through which that whole message, conversation, movement is made open to the public. So yes, it is a powerful tool.
Now, I may understand or even appreciate if you have a bias for poetry. I think I can wrap my head around that.
Okay.
But when poetry is described as a powerful form of expression
Mm-hmm.
or powerful art, form of art. Does that suggest that there are other forms of art that are not powerful
I see where this is
or they are
going.
not as powerful?
All forms of art are powerful. I'm not even going to get into that because that's like a it's almost something that comes up every single time. There's the old poetry, there's music, there's every form of art is powerful, but we're talking about poetry, and it is one powerful, you know, form of art. And somehow, in fact, of course, song music is it's poetry, with sound and extra melody. So it is just, should I say, the metamorphosis.
What drew you to poetry?
Poetry drew me to itself. I think that's a better way to put it because
How does that even happen?
because I cannot say I woke up one morning and decided to start doing poetry. It's like, I don't know if you've seen the movie where it's the ocean calls and Moana answers. That was the kind of thing that happened. So poetry drew me to itself. It found me like, I think you're a worthy.
Well, so poetry is a thing, like a living thing.
I would love to call it that. It is a living thing actually.
Are we delving into metaphysics?
Okay,
right
no,
now?
no, we are not. We're not. So let's just poetry drew me to itself because, like I said, I did not wake up one morning and say, you know what, let me go into poetry. No, I I kind of like developed love for it, and somehow it continued. It was something that I found out I could not stop. I couldn't stop writing. I've always been a writer, but I did more of fictional stories and telling fictional stories in school to my classmates, and but it moved on into poetry and writing differently from how I would write a story. Yeah.
Do you remember the first poem you ever wrote and the circumstances or scenario how you came about writing it?
Yes. I remember. I may not remember the lines, hook, line, and sinker, but I remember the first poem. And if it's okay to share, it was for my dad's funeral. Yeah, it was for my dad's funeral. I think that was the first poem I wrote. Something before that, I would call poetry, but it was rather termed rhythmic praises. But I think the first poem that I wrote was for my dad's funeral.
How has poetry impacted your life personally?
Let me start by saying poetry is so vast. And if you are one who is going into poetry or you are a poet, you are exposed to this ocean of topics and conversations that are most times not around the thing you do. So this is what I mean. Poetry has allowed me, venture into different fields somehow just by writing. I get to research about science, I get to research about, aside art, sciences, and every other thing, or should I say field of study, or what's another word I can use? So basically, it has given me a well of knowledge concerning different things, or maybe chap knowledge about different things. I think that in itself is an impact. So if you are inviting me for an event where, okay, let me use an example. I've been to an event where I had to talk, it was based off oil and gas, and then I'm researching that. I am not into oil and gas, but somehow I had to read about that. Or going to speak to doctors now, you have to, just you want to be grounded in whatever you're going to present. You want to be grounded so that your audience understands you or you can relate with your audience. So that in itself, I think I would consider impactful.
For most persons who are engaged in some form of art or the other, at whatever level, usually have an inspiring figure, whether you're into literature or any other art form for that matter. In your case, as far as poetry is concerned, who um, or what poets have inspired you?
Yeah, because when you said who, in my mind, I'm like, it's not one person. So I grew up listening to the likes of Sarah Kay, Janetti herself, Ezekiel. They now have this thing called um, Poets in Autumn. So those people they inspired, in fact, they expanded and deepened my love for poetry, pattern of delivery, the message. So I just figured, poetry it was, let me not say was, it is a lot bigger than what I knew it to be, listening to them. So I figured, oh, you don't necessarily have to just be in your house and write poetry. It can take you to different places. It can take you far. It can take you wide. Your story can push you so far. So yes, they inspired. I think they have contributed to my love for poetry.
So aside poets themselves, can you mention one poem in particular that's had significant impact on you, and why?
It draws me back to Sarah Kay. I know she had this poem titled "If I Should Have a Daughter." But now the interesting thing about that piece is that it wasn't just around having a daughter. It was something that was more. It was larger than that. It was very broad because she talked about life generally and not giving up and rising to face whatever challenge. And when results don't look like the way you want them to do, the way you want them to look, rather, feel it and then start again. So that poem covers a whole lot, a whole lot. Yeah, I think that poem has influenced me significantly.
All right. Now, this year's theme for World Poetry Day is poetry's transformative role in promoting peace, creativity, and inclusion. What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, like we said when we started, poetry can be used to push different ideas and stories. It can be that channel where you use to talk about different conversations and basically a movement too. So I think this theme is just throwing more light on poetry because it has already been doing this work. Transformative input, creative input, and inclusion. And for inclusion, it's even more because now we don't just have poetry in English. I know a poet who does poetry in Yoruba. People do poetry in their different languages. And then, not just for us here, in different parts of the world. So it allows you to accept other cultures. It allows you to, in fact, if you love poetry and you are interested in poetry, or generally you admire the art, you would be more drawn to how other cultures express themselves through poetry. And which, of course, drives you into falling in love with different cultures. It drives you into wanting to know more. So I think this is a very interesting theme for this year's World Poetry Day. And aside poets, humans generally should accept the arts more and include it more or accept it as much as we accept other forms of art. It's already happening. It's already happening. So this is like making it more expansive. This is making it even more broad. than it has been in past years.
Is there a less or lesser acceptance of poetry compared to other art forms?
That's a conversation on its own, because we're having this conversation recently, and I'm like, prior to this time, say 2024, if I prior to 2024, poetry was not this included. Like when you have events, you would hardly hear.
2024 was last year.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm saying prior to 2024, before rather,
Okay.
2024, please, pardon me, before.
Oh, which is still
Which
prior
is still
to-
prior.
yeah.
Yeah. So poetry was not very included in our different. You don't have an event and then you just easily hear them say, "Oh, we're going to have a poet." But now there's like, if you go online and on a scale of 1 to 10, at least you can come across a poetry video or a reel that a poet, or a reel that the sound is a poem. Do you understand? So it's becoming more accepted.
Is that a Port Harcourt River State thing, or are you describing a Nigerian scenario?
I'm describing a Nigerian scenario. Although the other parts like Lagos, especially Lagos, it's becoming more progressive. For Port Harcourt, we're getting there.
Okay. Earlier on, you described poetry as having styles. What did you mean by that?
Yes, that's one I like to talk about. So I could let me just go into the example. I could be here just using a mic and delivering my poem. But I could also act my poem. It takes us into the deep, performance poetry, page poetry, and basically performance and page poetry. So with page poetry, I could be reading my poem to you just that way. But with performance poetry, it comes with more action and style and pattern of delivery. Should we go into that? So basically there's it doesn't have just one pattern to performing poetry. I could be sitting down, I could be standing, I could be lying down. It takes different patterns. I could perform my poetry as a rap.
You could be skydiving.
Aside skydiving.
You could be falling into a well.
No, let's not fall into a well. I could use that line in my poem, but not falling into a well.
Okay.
Who's going to say when I'm falling into a well and performing my poem?
What is wrong with falling in the well? As long as HSC is observed, what's wrong with falling in the well and delivering poetry?
Okay, I don't know why I'm falling into a well and delivering my poem. I want to be alive.
If safety protocols are observed to ensure that there is no danger to life.
It's different when the individual has, trust issues with the safety protocols. But yeah, so it has different style and different pattern to poetry. Yeah. Can
anyone do poetry, or does it have to call you like he called you?
If you remember, I earlier said that if everybody realized that somehow in our day-to-day living and communication, we have expressed ourselves in a poetic way, I think we may just figure out that we're all poets. Yeah, we may just figure out that we're all poets. Anyone can do poetry as far as you can talk and we can hear you. Yeah, anyone can do poetry. Speaking about even hearing you could act your poem without necessarily saying so much.
Or you could write it.
You could write it, which of course we have page poetry. So anyone can do poetry. It's just sometimes it is maybe to me, or if you are a poet, I'll consider it a skill to you because you already have it. But for some people, they may need to be taught how to deliver their poems or how to write their poems, or the kind of poems they should use for certain audiences. It's just anyone. I think you are a poet. You just have not. If you search deeper,
Ah, okay. All right.
you may.
I thought I missed a compliment somewhere in there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah. Okay. Great. I'm a I have it.
You do have it.
Ah.
I mean, if I told you to say something about this with the example I gave you earlier about this cup without just saying it's a cup, you can try. You want to?
Maybe not right.
Not. That's absolutely fine.
It is Canvas the Niger-Delta Roundtable in commemoration of World Poetry Day. We're discussing the topic, is poetry worth the words? My guest is Tonye Big Mama Franklin. We go for a break. We'll return shortly. This conversation will continue. Please stay with us.
Our yellow and black markers indicate pipeline and flow line right-of-way boundaries. Your activity could impact on the buried high-pressure hydrocarbon pipelines and flow lines, leading to possible leaks and explosion. Please keep off. Do not engage in sand mining or any form of excavation, pipeline vandalism, oil theft, and bush burning within pipeline and flow line right-of-way. Do not farm, trade, or locate any business on pipeline and flow line right-of-way. It is against the law to apportion land, sell, or build on pipeline and flow line right-of-way. Maintain a setback distance of at least 30 meters or about 100 feet from the right-of-way boundaries always. We care for your safety and that of the environment.
This message is brought to you by the Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria Limited, SPDC, operator of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, NNPC Limited, Total Energies, and Ajib Joint Venture.
Welcome back. It is Canvas and Niger-Delta Roundtable brought to you by SPDC. I'm Dio, and we're discussing in commemoration of World Poetry Day, is poetry worth the words? My guest is a creative, she's a poet, Tonye Big Mama Franklin. Tonye, welcome again.
Thank you again, Daya,
Great to have you here.
the newest poet in town.
We'll see.
You try that out.
We'll see. We'll see. So before we went on the break, you more or less, and correct me if I'm wrong, you more or less said everyone is a poet, or everyone can do poetry, or everyone possibly at some point in their life has even done poetry.
Yes.
Without giving it any thought. That said, just like any other art form or any other human endeavor, we have different skill levels or proficiency levels. Some people are better at certain things than others, including sports or whatever other thing, anyways. So what makes a good poem? What makes one better than the other?
I would not. My goodness, this particular question. I would say if that would strongly be dependent on what that poem is for. I cannot just say this poem is better than this poem. If you deliver a poem to a Gen Z audience and the poem is so relatable, you have them screaming and, saying, okay, usually we do this thing where we snap, just in case you're wondering.
I'm not going to make any jokes. Go on.
Okay, all right, thank you. So if it was so relatable, you had them clapping and cheering you on, it could be considered a good poem because your audience could relate to the poem and it was seamless. Now, in the same setting, that audience, they may not be clapping and cheering you on, but they got the message. It still is a good poem. So I would say a good poem is the one that, carries the message you intended to, or passes the message you intended to pass. That's a good poem. But if we're going to talk on a, for lack of a better word, specific angle, if it was going to be a poetry production where you had to act and, use energy, gestures, and the rest. And you did not do all of that. It still is a good poem, but maybe not a good performance.
Okay.
Does that
No,
help?
it helps, but I'm
Yeah.
not letting it go yet.
Okay.
There must be a reason. You mentioned the name earlier on as one of the poets who's inspired
Yes.
you. What's the name again?
I
Remind me.
mentioned Sarah Kay and Janetti.
Okay, thank you. Now, there are the likes of Maya.
Of
Angelou,
course,
and others.
of course.
There must be a reason that those names stand out in the field of poetry. So there must be some standard, I guess.
Okay.
I'm just guessing here.
No, it's correct too. So I was also drawn to this poet. Now, Sarah Kay is different from Janetti. I have watched the latter act poetry and it resonates with my kind of person. And the kinds of poems I saw myself writing required me to be more, actively involved in it, not just passively delivering my poems. Do you are looking at me like, okay,
No,
is
I'm,
it, yeah?
I'm, I'm
Are you following?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So there's the knowing what to do with a particular poem. That does not mean that you can't write a poem where you're just easily rendering it without stress, without having to. It must not always be dramatic. So that's the thing with poetry. It mustn't always be dramatic. It mustn't always be, simply or lightly delivered.
Okay.
So I can't really say I can't really give you a poem to say, okay, this is a good poem. But there are things that if we follow our basic teachings, it has to have the rhymes. It has to have, of course, I mentioned earlier that poetry is the color in the words, how colorful you make the words sound. So it has to have the rhyme scheme. It has to have the that rhythm. It has to have, of course, if you're delivering something, it has to have the message. So basically, those are the should I say condiments? It's like you're cooking. It's a pot of food, and everything has to be inside to give it that beautiful taste. So yes, if you read more about it, because we can't exhaust that here now.
No, I know I said earlier I wasn't going to make any jokes. And
Okay,
I'm really hoping I'm able to stick
don't
to
keep
that.
to your words.
But really, why do poets feel the need to do this? And
To snap.
I don't know if you've seen those skits made by Lasisi.
Oh my goodness. Oh no.
What?
We had him one time on one of our events.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why do you guys feel the need to do this?
Okay.
I don't know.
Let me take it into music. I don't know if you've heard this song. When the bed do the enter body. Yes, that is when the words are sinking for
as
poets.
Brana,
Yeah.
right?
So it's like we are snapping. Oh, word. Oh, that line. I really felt it. It's like I say something like, what's the closest? Okay, I have a line that goes, we live in a society where a man will turn his face away from his people and claim he gave back to society. Now, did you get it?
No, I could have just done. I didn't have to go.
Okay, but because we're poets, we have that. There's that. That's how we clap. Okay,
You could have just clapped also.
No, exactly. You can't clap because
Why can't I
in
clap?
poetry we feel like that it's more distracting when you clap.
And this is not distracting.
It's not because it's light. It's there in the air, but it's not taking over the atmosphere. Okay, if you try clapping now and then I try snapping, we will know the difference in noise production.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if 100 people were doing this,
It is still not compared to 100 people clapping. But that does not mean that the poet should not, assimilate their poem enough to ignore a clap, because people still clap. I mean, we find ourselves in mixed audiences and they clap because they feel it, and that's like the closest way to cheer you on. Oh my goodness, I felt that, and then they clap. Yeah, but this is our thing. This is our thing.
yeah. I saw those kids by Lasisi. Okay. In your opinion, does poetry have any relevant role in society today? especially in the Nigerian, or even if we bring it closer home, in the Niger Delta society, does poetry play any relevance at all?
That's like asking, does music play any relevant role? It's like saying, does dance play any relevant role? It's like saying the things that keep people, going and alive play. It's like asking those things, do they play any relevant role? Of course, poetry does. It plays a very relevant role, especially because a lot of creatives are younger people. No shades. I love my advanced people, but a lot of people, a lot of younger people are into poetry, are into creative things. And these days, it is not just in skit making, you hear punchlines. Poetry has punchlines. Skit making carries punchlines. Music in itself, in its different, delivery patterns, carries punchlines. So if the larger, should I say, the larger group of people who find themselves in these things are young people, and this is their way of expressing themselves, then of course it plays a very relevant role in understanding what people are about, what people go through, what problems there are that may need to be heard, may need to be talked about, so that they are noticed and addressed.
How is poetry different from other forms of literature?
Poetry is, in my opinion, not it is not very different from other forms of literature. If we use look, poetry, it's like, it's, to me, an umbrella name that accommodates, or a large mansion, of course, without doors that will close, that accommodates different other forms. In poetry, like I said earlier, someone could deliver their poem as though they're singing it or rapping it. So or dance to it. I've seen poetry and dance. I've had an idea of poetry and dance. So it encompasses it accommodates every other form of literature. It allows for display through all other forms of literature.
I know you inferred this earlier on, but I need to ask you, a more direct question on it. Can and how can poetry be employed as a tool for societal change?
First of all, you can't send the only way you can send someone on an errand is first even acknowledging that they're there. If you act like you don't see the person you would love to send on an errand, you obviously won't send them on that errand. So the best way to include poetry is first accepting that it plays a major role, and it can continue playing a major role, and employing it into everything as much as possible that we do for like I mentioned earlier. It could be used to push a movement. It could be used to tell stories. I mean, we have different poems that talk about history, poems that address, problems that we've faced in the past or currently. It's even like poetry addresses things in real time. When we had the NSAS, we saw a lot of poets coming out to talk about it through poetry. We saw poets, bringing out just different things for that particular movement. So first of all, it's acknowledging that there's poetry and it plays a large role. There are poets, and then employing the art itself, the creativity in it, into every other angle or sector or things that we need to address. It's that simple. Acknowledgement breeds usage.
Let's talk about poets themselves for a bit.
Okay.
There are broad generalizations when it comes to people who are players in certain fields. There are perceptions about musicians, also depending on the kind of music that you do anyway. There are perceptions about people in the performing arts, actors. There are perceptions about sports people as well, depending on what kind of sports also.
Why do I feel like I know where this is going?
I have heard expressed the perception that poets are weird people. Yeah, and some would go as far as saying they're not normal.
Okay.
Well, don't blame the messenger.
No. I won't. I'll try not to.
Yeah. So, are poets necessarily that way? Are they weird? Do you have to be weird to be a poet?
You don't have to be. No, you don't have to be. Oh my goodness. You see, with poetry, with this question, there's no straight answer. There's no ABC. You don't have to be weird to be a poet. I think it's the pattern we've perceived poetry from, our primary school days, how they are rendered or how they are written, like you mentioned, the epic Homer. But you don't have to be weird to be a poet. And they are not abnormal as per running on the streets abnormal. But I dare say you cannot be very normal to be a creative generally. If you see things in the very normal way, you cannot express creativity as much. And you will agree with me that we have a lot of creatives like that, whether in poetry, whether in music or comedy, comedy, we could mention a whole lot of them. So you don't have to be weird or abnormal. Poets are not, they are very, do I look abnormal to you though?
No, you don't. You don't
Of course.
look
Do I look weird to you?
No, you don't look
Not
weird.
exactly.
No, you don't.
Not at all. So they are perfectly okay. It's just it takes a level of depth to be able to bring out that much creativity in them.
With other art forms, people or those who practice or engage in them are able to make a living off them. Writers, for example. I mean, when I was a child, one of my biggest dreams, if not the biggest dream, was to be a published author. And of course, being a published author, you start to make you can make a decent living. You can make a significantly higher than decent living from writing prose and fiction, things like that. Even non-fiction writers also. Can one make a living from poetry?
One can be on the journey to making a living from poetry. Like I said earlier, it boils down to the same things I mentioned. Here in this part of the world, especially in this region, it is
Niger-Delta?
not, yes, it's not very recognized. We're beginning to accept it. We're beginning to, include it some more, have it featured in a lot of things, but we're still getting there. It's not there yet where I can say, okay, you know what? I'm not doing my 9 to 5. I am a poet. I look forward to that too. I look forward to just saying, I'm a poet. I know that I could earn a living, or I am earning a living from just being a poet. I think where we are now is, having other sources of income to give more visibility to this creative part, or maybe adding from your other creative parts if you are, you are excessively creative. You're this, you're that, you're just adding to this. Even though it's a 9 to 5, basically taken from different sources to give this visibility.
So why should a Niger Delta kid who might be watching or listening to this right now, why should they get involved in poetry? If, and I'm going with what you said,
Yeah.
the chances of making a living off it, especially in our region, in our climate, is quite slim. What would be the point to it then?
First of all, why should you just let a conversation where someone gave, her opinion stop you from doing that thing you love? First of all, if it is something you love, it will be hard not to continue with it. It will be hard. I'm not saying it will be impossible, but it will be hard not to continue with it. But that is why I say it is becoming progressive. We are getting there. So to the kid watching, or to the Niger-Delta kid watching me right now, you obviously are also exposed to the level at which poetry is growing. And if you love it, which of course I love it, I like where it is going. A few years back, I could not say this. It will keep you on it. You will keep at it to continue. And obviously, it's going to be yielding something, I dare say.
All right. To that person who's watching or listening to this right now, who maybe wants to start consuming poetry, reading or watching or listening to it, or even writing for that matter, what would you say? What would you say to them?
So this is what I always tell myself. It is first about you and what you're drawn to. When something is given to you, or you begin to develop interest in a particular thing, you look at it from the angle of what is the rate of my own influence as an individual on this thing, as opposed to external influence. It's mine higher. Like, my love for it, is it higher than what I hear outside, or what I hear a third party tell me? If yes, please continue. Just go for it. The thing is, for a lot of people who have broken out and become, names that we could mention in conversations just without even thinking, sometimes it is housed in this phrase, or in this clause: you never can tell. That one poem that you would write or put out there that would just go viral. We're in the digital era, and social media is very wild, and you would be shocked the amount of visibility you could get from one piece. So just keep at it, and of course, you are your bigger motivation. Really, you are.
Speaking of names that one could mention without giving it too much thought, you did mention some names rather,
Yes.
earlier on. Those are globally recognized names.
Recognizing it.
But how about local and on the home scene?
Oh.
Even Niger-Delta, do we have such names?
Of course, we have in Niger-Delta. We have names like that. We have the likes of our OGs. Let me start from our OGs. Kudo Eresia. We have so many names amongst my should I say set of the poets I met.
Your contemporaries?
Yes, of course I could mention my name without giving it much thought. There's Big Mama. There's Tamara Dokubo. There's the silent poet. There's Agwe. There's Gray. There are so many people. There are so many poets I could think of in the Niger-Delta.
And one name comes to mind for me almost immediately as well, Graciano.
Oh my goodness, Graciano. There's Graciano. So
that's how it's pronounced. Graciano.
Yes,
okay.
Graciano.
Okay.
He has a way of rolling his tongue. So these are they are our OGs. Okay, so these are names that they have set the standard, they have set the pace, and we see them keep at it. We have this yearly event, More Life Poetry Festival, the Port Harcourt Poetry Festival, that is, launched by More Life. And we have different poets from OGs to our contemporary poets coming in to, do poetry and just expressing the art form. It is beautiful to see. So, of course, we have these names that we can't help but mention.
We're wrapping this up shortly. But we're speaking of events. March 21 annually is World Poetry Day. So you've been at this for a while now.
Yeah.
How long now? You're foray into poetry?
Oh, my goodness. It's over a decade. That's yeah.
So you've been in for a while. Do we organize any events in commemoration of World Poetry Day here in River State and Niger-Delta? Do we have events?
We do have events. We have poetry events. We have open mics. Sometimes based off the date, it might not be on the set date, but there are events that commemorate it. For example, I work with this poetry company, More Life Poetry, as their media relations person. Now, we have a monthly open mic session where, we entertain different art forms, poetry, music, comedy, and the rest. And the one for this month is also going to commemorate the World Poetry Day. Okay. And we have the Port Harcourt Poetry Festival, we have Lagos Poetry Festival, we have different poetry festivals. So, yeah.
When and where do your open mics happen?
It happens in, the evening, it's called Evening Breeze, the open mic. It happens every last Sunday of the month at PRA Grand Orchard. So, yes. It happens every last Sunday. And it is a very beautiful experience. Look, we've had people who are not even poets looking forward to be there because of how exciting it is. And this is not just because I have a bias. It's true. It's facts. You can make your findings.
I believe you.
Thank you.
It's been a truly interesting and exciting conversation with you.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
Very much.
Aside the part where you're making jokes of.
I didn't. Blame Lasisi Elena for that.
Okay, all right. Yes, I will.
And that's it for this episode of Canvas in Niger-Delta Roundtable in commemoration of World. Don't be that. Oh my goodness. In commemoration of World Poetry Day, March 21 every year, we discussed is poetry was the words. And my guest has been Tonye Big Mama Franklin, a creative, a poet. Tonye, thank you. Big Mama, thank you for your time. Great having you here.
I'm honored. I loved it. I enjoyed myself. Thank you.
And to close out this episode of Canvas in Niger-Delta Roundtable, we'll be having Big Mama deliver or perform an original poem of hers. Thank you for joining this edition of Canvas in Niger-Delta Roundtable brought to you by SPDC. I'm Daya Lishakin. And now, performing an original poem titled Let the Pen Live, is Tonye Big Mama Franklin.
Let the pen leave and bleed through my thoughts on virgin shit. Blood prints of innocent throats slit, deep-rooted corners the media couldn't reach. And let it pour, like sanitizers on handshakes of those negotiating human rights. Aimless fight, this mess age neglecting the message of the wise. Youth who are foolish in their wisdom, wanting to get to the top of the ladder before they start the climb, where guys would rather bark than sing. Sweet-sounding voices that best describe the meeting points for alphabets and mathematical symbols like G+. Morals has been stabbed in the chest by a ruthless generation who would save us, pray us clean. Instead, they praise us and call it win. It makes no sense. Heads pinned down, legs up to the sky, showing heaven how we walked into our own mess. Oh, dear Spirit, may our children not be caught in the draining webs of modern-day shenanigans. Because this madness be dressed in head shields, heavy sweatpants, and hooded cardigans. I'm Big Mama.